Music degrees aren't necessarily bad, but for most musicians, they are a really expensive way of learning things you could get elsewhere for a fraction of the cost. I know there are a ton of videos on this topic already, but these are my thoughts based on my own experience having gone through it, and also my experience since having worked as a full-time musician for 15 years since graduating. Now, I'm not saying a degree will hold you back, but if you're thinking about doing one, you need to understand what you're actually getting, what you're not getting, and whether it lines up with what you really want from music. So before we get into the pros and cons, let me give you some context, because I'm not coming at this as some outsider who skipped university and now just wants to dunk on it. I actually did the degree. I did 4 years in Perth, Western Australia, studying jazz performance on drums. Straight out of high school, that was my dream. Both of my parents are musicians, and all I wanted to do was play drums all day and get as good as I possibly could. There was a drummer teaching there who I really admired, so that really sealed the deal. I packed up from Melbourne, I moved across the country and committed to it. And honestly, a lot of it was amazing. My playing improved massively. The practice rooms were open 24/7, and there was a small group of us that basically lived in them, kind of shedding until 1, 2, 3 a.m. most nights. It was competitive, it was inspiring, and it pushed me way further than I ever would have gone on my own. The environment itself was great, right? Constant recitals and ensembles and deadlines, surrounded by people who lived and breathed music. That kind of immersion is rare, and by my second year, also lecturers and students were booking me for gigs. So at 21, I was playing 5, 6 nights a week, and I felt like everything was lining up kind of exactly how it was supposed to. But then when I graduated and I moved back to Melbourne, everything changed, right? The phone really stopped ringing, and the network that I'd built didn't travel with me. And that's when I realized something most degrees never prepare you for. They make you a better player, but they don't teach you how to make a living. I also borrowed money to study. Now, in Australia, the loans are nowhere near as brutal as in somewhere like the States, but it's still not free, so it's definitely a factor. The cost is still real, and it doesn't guarantee you a career. So yeah, there are definite upsides, but those upsides come with limits. That's where we start getting into the bad. Now, here's the downside, the stuff that nobody puts on the brochure. Let's start with the obvious one, which is the cost. So like I said, I borrowed money to study. Now in Australia, first of all, the actual cost of doing a music degree is pretty low. We're talking like a few thousand per semester, and the loans don't stack interest the same way they do in the States. Plus, you only start paying off those loans once you hit a certain income bracket, which, let's be honest, a lot of musicians don't often reach. But in places like the US or the UK, we're talking, sometimes 30, 40, 50, over 100 grand in debt with interest. And music doesn't suddenly pay you more just because you've got that piece of paper. The debt is real, and for a lot of people, it ends up hanging around for decades. The second thing is the network. So like I said before, when I was in Perth, my phone would just ring. I would just get gigs. Every week, I was playing gigs, I was doing rehearsals, different ensembles, inside and outside of university. I was busy. But the second I moved back to Melbourne, I kind of lost all of that. And that's when I learned something that doesn't get talked about much, is that those networks that you create at university don't really travel with you. So you have to rebuild them every time you change city. So that kind of built-in scene that a lot of these universities kind of sell you, it only works as long as you kind of stay put. If you're studying now, start putting effort into connections outside of your degree, like local players, venues, teachers. That's where your future work actually comes from. And the third one, honestly, this is the one that frustrates me the most, is the complete lack of career training. You can graduate being able to analyze a Bartok score or shred giant steps at 300 BPM, but nobody ever sits you down and shows you how to survive as a working musician. Nothing on how to find gigs, nothing about how to earn outside of the classroom, nothing on how to get private students or how to price your lessons or how to actually market yourself. They'll train you to play like a pro, but they leave you completely unprepared to get paid like one. And that's a really common experience for a lot of graduating musicians, is that thought that once you're done, it's like, okay, now what? Now, I'll admit, when I went to university, it was about 15 years ago. So hopefully things have improved, but from what I've seen and heard just anecdotally, not a whole lot has changed. You can let me know in the comments if your experience has been any different. different. So yeah, the good stuff is real, but it comes at a pretty big price. And that leads to the ugliest part, which is the way the whole thing is sold to you. The ugly truth is that most of what you pay for at music school, you can now find elsewhere, cheaper, more flexible, and more personal. I'm not in any way anti-education, right? I'm a huge believer in learning from people who know more than you. I've done it my whole life, right? Through teachers and mentors or business coaching or even fitness coaching, right? Every big step I've made came from learning from someone who was further ahead than me. But the way you do that today doesn't have to mean enrolling in a university and taking on a mountain of debt. There's an entire online world of teachers, courses, coaches covering every style, instrument, and skill level that you can imagine. You can get world-class instruction at almost any price point, whether you want a one-off deep dive or a structured long-term program. And if you approach it intentionally, you can actually get a better education with more flexibility and more personal attention for a fraction of what a traditional degree costs. Let's take tuition, for example, right? Yes, obviously your playing improves during a degree, but that's not obviously because of the piece of paper, right? It's because you're getting consistent feedback from good teachers. And you don't need to pay 20 or 30 grand a year to get that. Some of the best musicians I know, genuinely world-class players and teachers, are teaching privately for 50 or 100 bucks an hour. You stack that up over a year and you'll get the same, if not better, progress without the debt. And here's the wild part. I've even heard of performance degrees here in the UK that don't include one-to-one lessons. Imagine paying thousands for a performance degree where you don't actually get personal instruction. That's insane. Then there's the network, right? They'll sell you on this. Universities love to frame it as buying access to a scene, right? But the reality is that you do kind of build your network the same way everyone does, by going out, by going to shows, by playing at jams, by connecting with other musicians. And that's free. Honestly, it's often more diverse and more useful than the bubble inside a conservatoire. And the immersion, you can create that too, right? Every major city has players who are obsessed and competitive and pushing each other to improve. And if you don't live in one, the internet has made immersion possible in ways that didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago. There's heaps of online communities and masterclasses and collaborations. And even the credibility side of things, right? Outside of academia or specific like classical orchestral parts, nobody cares. In 15 years of working professionally, I can count on one hand the amount of times someone asked me where I studied. What gives you credibility is your playing, your reputation, and whether people enjoy working with you. So here's the thing, whether or not you should go to music school really depends on your goals. And if you want to work in academia or classical performance, then yeah, a degree probably makes sense. But if your goal is to build a sustainable career, to teach privately or play gigs on your own terms, there are usually better and cheaper ways to get there. Because the truth is, what actually moves the needle in a music career has nothing to do with a piece of paper. It comes down to the skills that make you valuable and visible in the real world, and that's what we'll get into next. All right, so if the degree isn't the thing that gets you work, what actually does? What are the skills that really make the difference when you're trying to build a music career? Let's start with the obvious one, but it's still worth saying, right? Obviously, you've got to be able to play your instrument. You've got to be good, okay? You got to develop solid skills. Nobody expects you to be the best in the world, right? But you do need to show up competent, right? That means being able to hold down a solid groove on whatever your instrument is, learning songs, right? Learning repertoire for shows, having good stage presence, having oral skills to adapt real time. If you can walk into a rehearsal and make the band sound better, you're pretty much immediately hireable, right? But that's the baseline skill. The second skill is networking, okay? Actually connecting with people and not just passively being around. I'm talking about showing up and reaching out to people, going to jam sessions, following up with the people that you meet, and sometimes even creating your own work. Social media has made this so much easier these days. It's easier than ever to connect with musicians and build a strong network. Most of the gigs that I've ever been booked for came from just being out and hanging after shows or meeting people and just being top of mind when someone needed a drummer, right? The next day when they were booking something. If you're studying now, get into that habit early, right? Don't just hide in the practice room, right? Half of this game happens in conversations and not in classrooms. The third skill is finding other ways to generate income outside of gigging. Because if you're only relying on gigs, especially early on, you're really going to struggle. The musicians who stick around are the ones who diversify a little bit, okay? They do a mix of session work, a bit of remote recording. They maybe teach a little bit, do some online teaching or local teaching. Those things create a baseline of income that buys you time and headspace to build the rest of your career. Think of it as your financial runway, the thing that keeps you afloat while you're growing everything else. The fourth one, honestly, this might be the hardest, is patience. Building a sustainable music career is not a 6-month project. It takes years of consistent work and a lot of perseverance before things start to feel steady. If you expect overnight results, you'll give up way too soon. Most of the musicians who make it aren't necessarily more talented, they just stayed in the game long enough for their work to actually compound. So the skills that really move the needle aren't buried inside a degree curriculum. They're the simple, practical ones. Play well, connect with people, find ways to earn beyond gigs, and stick it out long enough to let those efforts build some momentum. If you're interested in the teaching side of things, especially online, that's what this whole channel is about. So check out some of my other videos after this one. And if you want to go a little bit deeper, I've also created a free community to help musicians set up their teaching or coaching online. You'll find the link below, so have a look and join it if it feels right for you. Because I talk a lot about the teaching side of things here, I want to answer a question that I get all the time, which is, do you need a degree to teach music? And the answer is annoyingly both yes and no. If you want to work in higher education, like universities, conservatoires, that kind of thing, then yeah, you're going to need the piece of paper. Probably even a master's or a doctorate, depending on the role. Academia runs on qualifications. But for private teaching or teaching online, no, you don't. Students don't care where you studied, okay? They care about whether or not you can help them get better. Teaching is its own skill. You can have no degree and be brilliant at it because you know how to explain things clearly and adapt to different students. Or you can have a degree, even in music education, and still be a lousy teacher if you've never actually put in the reps doing it. Question people often ask next is, when am I ready to start teaching? And honestly, I think it's much sooner than you think, right? You don't need to be a virtuoso. You just need to be a few steps ahead of whoever you're helping. And if someone's learning the basics, right? Basic chords or trying to hold down a groove, and you can do those things confidently, then you're already valuable to those people. So private teaching is definitely one of the most reliable ways to build a little bit of stability early on. It usually pays better than non-music side jobs, and it keeps you in music as a music-related job. And it actually makes you better because you have to articulate the things that you know, which you can apply to your own practice. So no, you don't need a degree to teach. What you do need is just the confidence to share what you know and the patience to keep improving the craft of teaching itself. So what if you're already in a music degree? Do you just drop out tomorrow? No, absolutely not necessarily. If you're already there, you probably had a good reason for enrolling, right? Maybe it was the teachers, maybe it was the network, or just wanting that environment to push your playing. All of those things still have value, right? And if you're halfway through, it probably makes sense to finish it, right? And kind of squeeze every bit of use out of it. But here's the key, okay? Don't treat the degree like it's a ticket to a job, because it's not. Use it to build your chops, right? Develop some connections, and at the same time, start learning the skills that will actually pay your bills once you graduate. Start figuring out how to get booked for gigs and hustle playing opportunities on your own, right? Learn how to show up professionally, on time, being prepared, right? Being easy to work with. Pick up a few private students if you can, right? Start earning and improving your teaching skills, and try and make some connections that could lead you to a little bit of studio or remote recording work. If you're spending all that time and money, make sure you're getting a return on it. Go to the jam, say yes to the opportunities, build relationships with lecturers or players who are still active in the scene. Because the worst case is you graduate with a piece of paper and no idea how to survive. But the best case is you walk out with, an improvement to your playing, a bunch of connections, and a head start because you used your time strategically. And part of that strategy is setting up ways to earn outside of gigs. So when you graduate, you've got some options. So here's the bottom line. Music degrees aren't a scam and they're not like useless, but for most musicians, they're just not the smartest investment anymore. You don't need 4 years and a mountain of debt to prove yourself and to get something valuable. What actually matters is simple, right? It's you improve your playing, you build strong relationships, and you create income streams that give you the flexibility to say yes to the opportunities that you actually want. You don't have to wait for a degree or permission from anyone to build a career in music. And again, if you're curious about that side of things, the teaching and the coaching, and a way of building a bit of a more sustainable way to make a living after the degree, that's what this whole channel is about, right? And like I said before, I've also put together a free community for musicians who want to do this, right? Who want to set up their teaching or coaching online. So you'll find the link below, have a look and see if it feels right for you. Either way, keep going, keep improving, keep connecting, and keep building the version of a music career that actually works for you.